The ivory keys felt cold beneath Beatrice Garrett's fingertips as she played the last melancholic notes of a song she had composed in the darkest hours of the previous night, when sleep refused to come, and memories of her late father haunted every shadow in her cramped room above the Silver Star Saloon. It was 1878 in San Angelo, Texas, and the frontier town buzzed with cattle drives, dusty cowboys, and the kind of raw energy that could build fortunes or destroy lives in the span of a single card game. Beatrice had learned to survive in this world by keeping her head down, her fingers nimble on the piano, and her heart locked away where no drunken patron or smooth-talking gambler could reach it. She had been playing at the Silver Star for nearly 2 years now, ever since her father's death had left her without family, without money, and without options in a world that offered women precious few ways to earn an honest living. The saloon was already filling up despite the early afternoon hour. Cowboys fresh off the trail crowded around tables, their voices loud with the relief of men who had spent weeks under open skies with only cattle and each other for company. Beatrice transitioned smoothly into a livelier tune, something with enough spirit to match the energy in the room but not so boisterous that it would encourage the kind of rowdy behavior that sometimes led to broken furniture and, on rare occasions, broken bones. She had learned to read a room the way her father had once read the weather, sensing shifts in mood before they fully materialized. "Play something with some fire in it, Miss Beatrice," called out one of the regulars, a grizzled prospector named Dutch who had been coming to the Silver Star since before she had arrived. He was harmless enough, always respectful despite the whiskey that stained his breath. "I am playing with fire," Beatrice replied without missing a note, her voice carrying just enough warmth to soften the refusal. "But I prefer not to burn the place down." Laughter rippled through the nearby tables, and Dutch raised his glass in acknowledgement. These small exchanges had become part of her routine, a way to seem friendly and approachable without actually letting anyone get too close. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance. The saloon girls who worked the floor had different concerns, different boundaries to maintain, but Beatrice's position at the piano offered her a measure of protection. She was entertainment, a fixture of the establishment, and Mr. Thornton, the saloon's owner, had made it clear to his patrons that she was not to be bothered beyond polite requests for songs. The afternoon stretched into evening, and the crowd grew thicker. Beatrice's fingers ached, and her back had begun to protest the hours spent on the piano bench, but she pushed through the discomfort. The pay was meager, barely enough to cover her room and meals with a few coins left over each month, but it was steady work in a town where nothing else was guaranteed. She had seen women turn to far worse options when faced with poverty, and she thanked God every night that she had the skill her father had insisted she develop, even when they could barely afford the lessons. She was midway through a popular dance hall tune when the saloon doors swung open with enough force to draw attention. A man stepped inside, and something about him made Beatrice's fingers falter for just a fraction of a second before training took over and she recovered the rhythm. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, and the way his eyes swept the room with the practiced assessment of a man who had learned to evaluate situations quickly. He did not head for the bar like most newcomers. Instead, he found an empty table near the back wall, positioned so he could watch both the entrance and the rest of the room. Smart. Beatrice had seen enough trouble in her time at the Silver Star to recognize the habits of a man who knew how to handle himself. He settled into the chair with economical movement. And when Sally, one of the serving girls, approached his table, he ordered quietly, his voice too low for Beatrice to catch the words over the music and the general din of conversation. Beatrice told herself not to stare, not to let her curiosity get the better of her professional composure, but she found her gaze drifting back to him between songs. There was something different about him, though she could not quite put her finger on what it was. Perhaps it was simply that he seemed content to sit and listen to the music, rather than drink himself into oblivion or lose his wages at the card tables. Perhaps it was the way he held himself, alert but not tense, present but not seeking attention. She transitioned into a slower ballad, one that allowed her to rest her fingers slightly while still filling the room with sound. The conversations around the saloon softened in response to the gentler melody, and in that quieter space, she felt rather than saw the stranger's attention focus more fully on her playing. It was not an uncomfortable feeling, not the leering assessment she sometimes endured from drunk patrons, but rather a sense of genuine listening. Someone was actually paying attention to the music itself, not just using it as background noise for drinking and gambling. The evening wore on, and the stranger remained at his table, nursing what appeared to be the same whiskey he had ordered when he first arrived. He did not join any card games, did not approach any of the saloon girls, and did not start any conversations with the other patrons. He simply sat, watched, and listened. Beatrice found his presence oddly comforting, though she could not have explained why to save her life. When her scheduled break finally arrived, Beatrice rose from the piano bench with relief, stretching her fingers and rolling her shoulders to ease the stiffness. She made her way toward the back stairs that led to her room, intending to rest for the 20 minutes Mr. Thornton allowed her before she would need to return to the keys. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was deep and measured, and Beatrice turned to find the stranger standing a respectful distance away. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the plains, and his face, though weathered by sun and wind, was younger than she had initially thought. He could not be more than 27 or 28, she guessed, though the lines around his eyes suggested he had lived a full measure of those years. "Yes." Beatrice kept her tone polite but guarded, her hand resting on the stair railing as if ready to flee if necessary. "I wanted to tell you that your playing is exceptional." He spoke with quiet sincerity, his hat now in his hands, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. "I have heard a lot of saloon pianists in my travels, and most of them are just pounding out noise. But you actually play with feeling. It is a rare thing." Beatrice felt heat rise to her cheeks, surprised by the genuine compliment. "Thank you, that is kind of you to say. I am not being kind, I am being honest." He shifted his weight slightly, and she noticed he wore a gun at his hip, but carried it with the casual familiarity of a tool rather than a threat. "My name is Austin Cole. I own a ranch about 15 miles north of town." "Beatrice Garrett," she replied, though she suspected he already knew her name. Most people in San Angelo knew who played piano at the Silver Star. "Miss Garrett, I have a proposition for you." Austin's expression remained serious, his eyes holding hers. "I would like to hire you to play at my ranch." Beatrice's guard went up immediately. She had heard propositions before, dressed up in various forms of politeness, and they all led to the same place. "I already have employment, Mr. Cole. Thank you for the offer. I do not think you understand." Austin's voice remained steady, betraying no offense at her cool response. "I mean hire you legitimately to play piano. I had one brought out from St. Louis last year, but it mostly sits silent. I would like to hear music in my home. Real music, played by someone who understands it. No crowds required. No drunks requesting bawdy songs. Just you and the piano and the peace of the ranch. Beatrice stared at him, trying to determine if he was sincere or if this was some elaborate ruse. Why would you want to hire a pianist for your ranch? That seems an unusual expense for a cattleman. A flicker of something, perhaps sadness or memory, crossed Austin's face. My mother played piano. She died 5 years ago and I had the piano sent out in her memory. But I cannot play myself, and hearing it sit silent feels wrong. Like letting her love of music die along with her. He paused, then added, I would pay you double what Thornton pays you here. You would have your own room in the main house, proper meals, and you would only need to play a few hours each day, whenever it suited you. The rest of your time would be your own. That is a generous offer. Beatrice spoke carefully, still uncertain of his true intentions. But I do not know you, Mr. Cole. Forgive me for being direct, but accepting such an arrangement would put me in a vulnerable position. I understand your concern, and it speaks well of your sense. Austin nodded, respect evident in his expression. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who lives on the property with her husband. They can vouch for the respectability of the arrangement. You would not be alone out there with just me. And I give you my word as a man that my interest is purely in hearing my mother's piano played as it was meant to be played. Beatrice wanted to believe him. The offer was tempting beyond measure. Double her current pay would allow her to actually save money, to perhaps one day have choices beyond mere survival. And the thought of playing without the constant noise and chaos of the saloon, without the smell of spilled whiskey and tobacco smoke, was almost intoxicating. But she had learned caution the hard way. I need time to consider, she said finally. This is not a decision I can make in a moment. Of course. Austin reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a card which he offered to her. That has my name and the location of my ranch. If you decide you are interested, you can send word, or you can come out and see the place for yourself before making a decision. The offer stands for as long as you need to think about it. Beatrice took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. Even through her gloves, she felt the calluses that marked him as a man who worked with his hands. Thank you, Mr. Cole. I will consider it carefully. That is all I ask. Austin settled his hat back on his head, tipping it slightly in farewell. I hope to hear from you, Miss Garrett. Your music deserves better than this place. He turned and walked toward the saloon doors, moving with that same easy grace she had noticed when he first arrived. Beatrice watched him go, the card still in her hand, her mind already churning with possibilities and doubts in equal measure. When she returned to the piano after her break, she found her playing colored by distraction. Her fingers found the right keys. The melodies flowed as they always did, but her thoughts were 15 miles north, trying to imagine what Austin Cole's ranch looked like. What kind of man would buy a piano to honor his dead mother's memory? And whether she dared to hope that his offer might be exactly what it seemed. Over the next week, Beatrice found herself thinking about Austin's proposition at odd moments. She would be in the middle of a song and suddenly imagine playing it in a quiet ranch house instead of a crowded saloon. She would wake in the night in her cramped room, listening to the sounds of revelry from below, and wonder what it would be like to sleep in a place where silence was the norm rather than a rare gift. She made discreet inquiries about Austin Cole, carefully asking questions of some of the more reliable patrons who might know of him. What she learned only deepened the mystery. He owned one of the larger ranches in the area, ran cattle and horses both, and had a reputation for being fair but firm in his business dealings. He kept to himself mostly, came to town only when necessary, and had never been known to frequent the saloon or any of the other establishments that catered to men's bazaar entertainments. His parents had been respected members of the community before his father's death in a ranching accident 7 years ago and his mother's passing from illness 3 years later. "Why are you asking about Cole?" Dutch, the old prospector, asked her one afternoon when she had perhaps been a bit too obvious in her curiosity. Beatrice hesitated, then decided honesty was safer than invention. "He made me an offer to play piano at his ranch." Dutch let out a low whistle. "Did he now? That is interesting." "Cole is not one to act on impulse. If he made you an offer, he meant it serious. He is a good man, Miss Beatrice. Stern, maybe, and he keeps his own counsel, but honest as the day is long. His word is good." That conversation, more than anything else, helped Beatrice make her decision. 2 days later, she asked Mr. Thornton for an afternoon off, claiming she needed to attend to personal business. He grumbled but agreed, and Beatrice used the time to hire a wagon to take her north to Austin Cole's ranch. The ride took the better part of 2 hours, following a well-maintained road that cut through rolling grassland dotted with cattle. The landscape had a stark beauty to it, wide open spaces under an endless sky, and Beatrice found herself breathing deeper, as if the air itself was cleaner out here beyond the town limits. The ranch came into view gradually, first as a cluster of buildings in the distance, then resolving into distinct structures as the wagon drew closer. The main house was larger than she had expected, a sturdy 2-story structure built of good timber with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and sides. There were several outbuildings, a large barn, corrals, and what appeared to be housing for ranch hands. Everything was well maintained, speaking of prosperity and careful management. Austin must have spotted the approaching wagon because he emerged from the barn as they pulled into the yard, wiping his hands on a cloth. He wore work clothes, dusty from whatever task he had been engaged in, but his face lit with unmistakable pleasure when he recognized Beatrice. "Miss Garrett," he called out, striding toward the wagon, "I am glad you came." Beatrice accepted his hand as he helped her down, trying not to notice the strength in his grip or the warmth of his palm against hers even through their gloves. "I wanted to see the place before making a decision. I hope that is acceptable. More than acceptable. It is wise." Austin turned to the wagon driver, arranging payment and timing for the return trip, then gestured toward the house. "Come, let me show you around." The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior. The main room was spacious and well-furnished, with large windows that let in abundant light. But what drew Beatrice's attention immediately was the piano that stood against one wall, a beautiful instrument of polished mahogany that gleamed in the afternoon sun. She moved toward it as if pulled by an invisible string, her fingers trailing along the smooth wood. "It is magnificent. It was my mother's pride and joy after my father and me." Austin's voice held a note of old grief, softened by time but never fully erased. "She always said a house was not a home without music in it." Beatrice lifted the keyboard cover, revealing pristine ivory keys. She pressed one experimentally, and the note that rang out was pure and true, perfectly tuned. "Someone has been maintaining it. I have a man come out from town every few months to tune it and keep it in good condition." Austin moved to stand beside her, though he maintained a respectful distance. "I may not play, but I know enough to understand that a piano needs care." Unable to resist, Beatrice sat on the bench and began to play, starting with a simple melody and then letting it evolve into something more complex. The sound that filled the room was rich and full, so different from the tinny, often out-of-tune instrument at the Silver Star. She lost herself in the music, forgetting for a moment where she was and who was listening, simply reveling in the joy of playing a truly fine instrument. When she finally let the last notes fade into silence, she looked up to find Austin watching her with an expression of such deep satisfaction that it made her breath catch. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly what this house has needed, what I have needed." Beatrice felt her heart beating faster, though whether from the exertion of playing or from the intensity of his gaze, she could not say. "The piano is wonderful. The whole house is lovely. Let me show you the rest." Austin led her through the house, pointing out the kitchen where Mrs. Chen was already at work preparing the evening meal, the dining room with its solid oak table, and upstairs, a bedroom that he said would be hers if she accepted his offer. It was larger than her entire current living space at the saloon, with a real bed, a wardrobe, a writing desk, and windows that looked out over the ranch lands. Mrs. Chen and her husband, Lin, live in the cottage just behind the main house, Austin explained as they descended the stairs. "They have been with me for 3 years now, ever since they needed work and I needed reliable help. Lin manages much of the day-to-day ranch operations, and Mrs. Chen handles the house and cooking. They are good people." As if summoned by the mention of her name, a small woman with silver-streaked black hair appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes were sharp and assessing as she looked at Beatrice, but not unkind. "Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Beatrice Garrett, the pianist I told you about." Austin made the introduction with easy courtesy. "It is nice to meet you," Beatrice said, offering her hand. Mrs. Chen shook it firmly. "Mr. Cole says you play beautifully. It will be good to have music in this house again. His mother would have liked that." The simple statement, delivered with obvious sincerity, touched something in Beatrice. She had been so focused on the practical considerations and potential dangers of Austin's offer that she had not fully considered the emotional dimension. This was not just about employment. It was about bringing life back to a house that had known loss, about honoring the memory of a woman who had loved music. "Would you stay for supper?" Austin asked. "It would give you more time to see the place, to ask any questions you might have. I can have someone drive you back to town afterward." Beatrice knew she should probably decline, should maintain proper boundaries, but she found herself nodding. "That would be nice. Thank you." The meal was simple but delicious, far better than the food she usually ate. Mrs. Chen had roasted chicken with vegetables from the ranch's own garden, and there was fresh bread that was still warm from the oven. They ate in the dining room, and Austin proved to be a thoughtful conversationalist, asking about her background and her music without prying into anything too personal. Beatrice found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did around men, telling him about her father, who had been a music teacher before illness had taken him, about growing up with melodies as constant companions, about the strange path that had led her to playing piano in a frontier saloon. "I never imagined this would be my life," she admitted over coffee after the meal. "When I was young, I thought I might teach music like my father, or perhaps play in a concert hall back east, but life has a way of changing our plans." "It does," Austin agreed, and something in his tone suggested he spoke from experience. "But sometimes the changes lead us to places we did not know we needed to be." The sun was setting by the time one of the ranch hands brought a wagon around to take Beatrice back to town. Austin walked her out, and in the golden light of dusk, the ranch looked even more beautiful, peaceful in a way that made her chest ache with unexpected longing. "Have you made a decision?" Austin asked as he helped her into the wagon. Beatrice looked back at the house, at the windows glowing warm with lamplight, at the vast sky turning purple and gold above the grasslands. She thought about returning to her cramped room, to the noise and smoke and endless repetition of playing for people who barely listened. Then she thought about this place, about the beautiful piano and the quiet and the possibility of something different. "Yes," she said, meeting Austin's eyes. "I accept your offer, Mr. Cole. When would you like me to start?" The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "As soon as you are able. Take whatever time you need to settle your affairs in town. The position will be waiting for you whenever you are ready." 3 days later, Beatrice loaded her few possessions into a wagon and said goodbye to the Silver Star Saloon. Mr. Thornton was not pleased to lose her, but she gave him proper notice and even helped him audition a replacement. A young man from Fort Worth who played with more enthusiasm than skill, but would likely suit the saloon's needs well enough. Dutch and a few of the other regulars came to wish her well, and Sally, the serving girl who had been friendliest to her, hugged her and told her she was smart to take a chance on something better. "You deserve more than this place could ever give you," Sally whispered. "I hope you find happiness out there." As the wagon carried Beatrice north toward the ranch, toward her new life, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror that made her hands tremble in her lap. She was taking an enormous risk, trusting a man she barely knew, leaving the relative safety of familiar circumstances for complete uncertainty. But she was also choosing possibility over resignation, hope over mere survival, and that felt like a kind of courage she had not known she possessed. Austin was waiting when the wagon pulled into the ranch yard, and he personally carried her trunk upstairs to her new room. Mrs. Chen had placed fresh flowers on the writing desk and laid out clean linens on the bed, small touches that made Beatrice feel unexpectedly welcome. "I will let you settle in," Austin said from the doorway, his hat in his hands. "There is no rush to start playing. Take your time getting comfortable. This is your home now." That word, home, resonated through Beatrice long after he had gone. She stood at her window, looking out over the ranch as twilight descended, and allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Austin Cole was right. The first few weeks at the ranch passed in a pleasant rhythm that Beatrice had never experienced before. She woke with the sun, ate breakfast with Austin and sometimes the Chens, and then had the entire day to structure as she pleased. She played the piano for several hours each morning, losing herself in music that she chose freely, without requests or demands from others. Sometimes Austin was in the house and would sit in the main room, working on ranch accounts or reading while she played. Other times, she was alone with just the music and the light streaming through the windows. The afternoons she spent exploring the ranch, walking the paths that wound through the grasslands, or reading in the comfortable chairs on the porch. Mrs. Chen proved to be excellent company, teaching Beatrice basic cooking skills and sharing stories about her life in California before she and her husband had made their way to Texas. Austin was respectful of Beatrice's space, never pressing for her company but clearly pleased when she chose to spend time in conversation with him. He was different from any man she had known, quieter but not withdrawn, strong but never domineering. He spoke thoughtfully, listened carefully, and treated her with a regard that felt entirely new. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Beatrice was playing as the sun set, filling the house with a melancholy ballad that suited her reflective mood. She had not noticed Austin come in from the day's work until she finished the piece and found him standing near the doorway, his expression unguarded in a way she had not seen before. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "What is it called?" "It does not have a name. I composed it." Beatrice felt suddenly shy admitting this. "I sometimes write my own music when the mood strikes me." Austin moved closer, genuine interest in his eyes. "You compose. That is remarkable. Do you have others?" "A few. Nothing very good, just things I play for myself." She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, not quite playing. "I never had the training to do it properly. It sounded more than proper to me." Austin settled into his usual chair, but there was an energy about him that had not been there before. "Would you play another? One of your own compositions?" Beatrice hesitated, feeling vulnerable in a way that performing standard pieces never made her feel. Her compositions were personal, windows into her inner life that she rarely shared. But something about the way Austin looked at her, with such genuine interest and respect, made her want to share this part of herself. She played a piece she had been working on recently, something that captured the feeling of the ranch at sunrise, the way the light spread across the grasslands and painted everything gold. Her fingers moved over the keys with increasing confidence as she lost herself in the music, in the joy of creation. When the last notes faded, silence filled the room for a long moment. Then Austin spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Beatrice, that was extraordinary. You have real talent, not just as a performer but as a creator. Why did you never pursue this seriously?" The use of her first name, which he had never done before, sent a small thrill through her. "I told you, I never had proper training in composition. And it seemed like an impractical dream for a woman in my circumstances." "What if your circumstances were different?" Austin leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. "What if you had the time and freedom to develop this gift? What would you create then?" Beatrice had no answer, the question opening up possibilities she had trained herself not to consider. They sat in the growing darkness, neither moving to light the lamps, and something shifted between them. Some invisible boundary crossed without either quite acknowledging it. As spring deepened into summer, Beatrice found herself increasingly aware of Austin in ways that had nothing to do with their employer-employee arrangement. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the rare but genuine sound of his laughter, the careful way he handled the horses and treated everyone on the ranch with firm but fair regard. She noticed how he always made sure she had everything she needed, how he listened when she spoke as if her words truly mattered, how he never made her feel like her presence was anything less than valued. She tried to tell herself that these feelings were simply gratitude, natural affection for someone who had shown her kindness. But she knew she was lying to herself when her heart raced at the sound of his footsteps, when she found herself choosing dresses she thought he might find pretty, when she caught herself watching him through the window as he worked with the horses in the corral. One particularly hot afternoon in July, Beatrice had abandoned the piano in favor of sitting on the porch with a book, trying to catch any breath of breeze. Austin returned from checking on the cattle in the north pasture, dusty and tired, and stopped at the water pump to clean up before heading inside. Beatrice tried to focus on her reading, but her eyes kept drifting to where he stood, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms, water dripping from his hair as he ducked his head under the pump. When he looked up and caught her watching, she felt heat flood her face that had nothing to do with the summer sun. Austin crossed to the porch, using his bandana to wipe water from his face. "Sorry, I must look a sight. It was dusty work out there." "You look fine," Beatrice said, then immediately wished she could recall the words when she saw the surprise and pleasure flash across his face. "I mean, you look like someone who has been doing honest work. There is no shame in that." "No," Austin agreed, but he was smiling now, a warm, genuine smile that made her pulse skip. "There is not. Would you like to take a ride with me this evening when it cools down? There is a place I would like to show you if you are interested." Beatrice knew she should probably decline, should maintain the professional boundaries that were already becoming dangerously blurred, but she could not make herself say no. "I would like that." They set out as the sun began its descent, riding two of Austin's gentler horses across the grasslands toward the western edge of the ranch. Beatrice had learned to ride as a girl but had not been on a horse in years, and Austin was patient with her, setting an easy pace and offering occasional guidance that was never condescending. The place he brought her to was a small rise that overlooked a creek lined with cottonwood trees, their leaves rustling in the evening breeze. From this vantage point, they could see miles of rolling plains, the grasslands painted gold and amber by the setting sun. "My mother loved this spot," Austin said as they dismounted, his voice soft with memory. "She used to bring picnics out here when I was a boy. She said it reminded her that the world was bigger than our troubles, that there was beauty worth holding on to even in hard times." Beatrice stood beside him, watching the way the light moved across the land, understanding why his mother had found solace here. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." She was. Austin was quiet for a moment, then turned to look at Beatrice. "She would have liked you. She always valued creativity and courage, and you have both in abundance." "I do not feel very courageous most of the time," Beatrice admitted. "I feel like I am just trying to survive, to make the best of circumstances I never chose." "But that is exactly what courage is," Austin said, his gray-blue eyes serious. "It is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it, making choices that could hurt you because the alternative is to stop living altogether. You did that when you came here. You took a risk on trusting me, on believing that something better was possible. Did I make the right choice?" The question escaped before Beatrice could stop it, vulnerable and uncertain. Austin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, strong but gentle. "I hope so. I want you to be happy here, Beatrice, not just content or safe, but truly happy." She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb traced small circles on the back of hers, and felt something open in her chest, like a door she had kept locked swinging wide. "I am happy. Happier than I have been in longer than I can remember. And it frightens me because I know how quickly happiness can be taken away." "I know," Austin said, and she heard his own losses echoing in those simple words. "But I think we have to risk it anyway. Otherwise we are just existing, not really living." The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, and they stood together in comfortable silence, hands still linked, while the evening settled around them like a benediction. After that evening, something changed between them, some unspoken acknowledgement that what they felt was more than employer and employee, more than simple friendship. They did not speak of it directly, but it was there in the way Austin sought out her company, in the way Beatrice found excuses to be near him, in the growing ease and intimacy of their conversations. Mrs. Chen noticed, of course. She was too observant not to. But she said nothing beyond cryptic comments about how the house felt more alive than it had in years, and how some things were simply meant to be. August arrived with blazing heat and the constant work of the ranch. Austin was often gone long days, riding with his men to manage the cattle and prepare for the fall drive to market. Beatrice missed him more than she wanted to admit, counting the hours until she would hear his horse in the yard, until she would see him walk through the door with that tired smile he saved just for her. On one particularly hot evening, a severe thunderstorm rolled across the plains, bringing torrential rain and lightning that split the sky. Beatrice had been playing piano, trying to distract herself from Austin's absence, when the storm hit with full force. The wind rattled the windows and rain lashed against the house with such violence that she stopped playing, moving to look out at the tempest. She was watching the lightning illuminate the yard when she saw riders approaching through the rain. Austin and 3 of his men rode in, clearly exhausted and soaked through. Beatrice met him at the door with towels and concern. "Are you all right? Was anyone hurt?" She helped him out of his dripping coat, acutely aware of how his wet shirt clung to his frame. "We are fine. Just got caught out when the storm hit faster than we expected." Austin was shivering slightly despite the warm evening. "The cattle are secure. That is what matters. You need to get into dry clothes before you catch your death." Beatrice ushered him toward the stairs. "I will ask Mrs. Chen to make hot coffee." By the time Austin had changed and come back downstairs, Mrs. Chen had produced not just coffee, but also soup and bread for the men who had ridden in with him. They ate gratefully in the kitchen while the storm continued to rage outside. Beatrice found herself sitting with Austin in the main room, both of them drinking coffee and watching the lightning through the windows. "I was worried," Beatrice admitted quietly, "when the storm started and you were not back yet." Austin set down his cup and looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "I thought about you out there. Knowing you were here, safe and waiting, made me want to push harder to get back." Austin. His name on her lips felt significant, a claiming and a confession all at once. He moved closer on the sofa, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough to see the drops of water still caught in his hair. "Beatrice, I need to tell you something, and if it is unwelcome, if I am misreading what is between us, just say so and I will never speak of it again." Her heart was racing so fast she thought he must be able to hear it. "What do you need to tell me?" "I am falling in love with you." The words were simple and direct, pure Austin in their honesty. "I think I have been since the first time I heard you play at the Silver Star, but I tried to tell myself it was just appreciation for your talent. But these months with you here, getting to know you, seeing your kindness and your strength and your creativity, I cannot pretend anymore. I love you, Beatrice. And if there is any chance you might feel the same, I would like to court you properly, to see if we might build something together beyond just my employment of you." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the rush of emotion his confession unleashed. "I do feel the same. I have been trying not to, trying to be sensible and protect myself, but I cannot help it. I love you too, Austin." The smile that broke across his face was radiant, joy transforming his usually serious features. He reached for her hands, holding them between his own. "Then may I kiss you? I have wanted to for so long." "Yes," Beatrice breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded with all the longing she had been suppressing for months. When they finally parted, both breathless, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I will do this right. I will court you properly, and when enough time has passed, I will ask you to marry me. I want everyone to know that you are not just my employee, but the woman I love, the woman I want to spend my life with." "I want that too," Beatrice whispered, hardly believing this was real, that she had found not just safety and employment but love with a man who saw her, truly saw her, and valued all that he found. They sat together as the storm passed, talking about the future with a freedom they had not allowed themselves before. Austin spoke of his hopes for the ranch, of wanting to expand and build something lasting. Beatrice talked about her music, about wanting to continue composing and perhaps even teaching someday. They wove their dreams together, finding that they fit in ways neither had expected, two lonely people who had found their missing piece in each other. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Beatrice's life. Austin was attentive and romantic in ways that surprised her, bringing her wildflowers from the prairie, taking her on evening rides to watch the sunset, sitting for hours listening to her play and offering genuine thoughts on her compositions. He introduced her to his friends in town as the woman he was courting, and while there were some raised eyebrows at the former saloon pianist becoming the respectable Mr. Cole's intended, most people responded with genuine warmth. Beatrice continued to play piano, but now it was truly for joy rather than survival. She composed new pieces, some inspired by the ranch and the landscape, others capturing the swelling emotions of new love. Austin loved to hear her play, and sometimes in the evenings he would sit beside her on the piano bench, not playing himself but simply being close, his presence a comfort and a joy. 3 months after that stormy night when they had first confessed their feelings, Austin took Beatrice back to the rise overlooking the creek, the place where his mother used to picnic. It was a perfect September evening, the brutal heat of summer finally broken, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. They stood looking out over the land painted gold by the setting sun, and Austin took both of Beatrice's hands in his. My mother used to tell me that when I found the right woman, I would know because being with her would feel like coming home. I did not fully understand what she meant until I met you. He sank to one knee, and Beatrice felt her breath catch even though she had been expecting this, hoping for it. From his pocket, Austin withdrew a ring, simple gold with a small diamond that caught the light. Beatrice Garrett, you have brought music back into my home and love back into my heart. You have shown me that it is possible to build something new and beautiful from the ashes of loss. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you have made me? Tears streamed down Beatrice's face, but she was smiling so wide it almost hurt. Yes, yes, Austin, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both shaking. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, the sun had nearly set, painting the world in shades of amber and rose. I love you, Austin murmured against her hair. I will love you until the day I die and beyond that if such things are possible. I love you too, Beatrice replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. You saved me, Austin. You gave me a chance at a real life when I had given up on ever having one. No, Austin said, pulling back to look into her eyes. You saved yourself by being brave enough to take the chance. I just had the incredible good fortune that you chose to take it with me. They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in San Angelo. Beatrice wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Austin wore his best suit, and when he saw Beatrice walking toward him down the aisle, his eyes filled with tears of joy. Dutch and several of the other men from the saloon attended, happy to see Beatrice finding a good life. Mrs. Chen and her husband Lin were there, beaming with pride as if they had orchestrated the whole romance themselves. Several of Austin's friends and business associates filled the other pews, and the small church felt warm with genuine good wishes. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed Beatrice with such tenderness and love that several people in attendance wiped away tears. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Beatrice felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be. This was the life she was meant to live. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food that Mrs. Chen and several of the ranch wives had prepared. There was music from a fiddler Austin had hired, and dancing as the stars came out overhead. When the fiddler took a break, Beatrice played the piano for the guests, and Austin stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, both of them radiating happiness. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had departed, Austin and Beatrice stood together on the porch, looking out at the ranch that was now truly their home together. "Are you happy?" Austin asked, pulling her close against his side. Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, the ring on her finger catching the moonlight. "Happier than I ever imagined being. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe this is real." "It is real," Austin assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And it is forever. You are mine and I am yours, for all the days we have." They went inside together, and Austin carried Beatrice up the stairs to the bedroom they would now share, both of them laughing at the tradition and the joy of it. He set her down gently inside the door, and suddenly the laughter faded, replaced by something deeper and more profound. "I love you, Beatrice Cole," Austin said, wonder in his voice at her new name. "I love you, Austin," Beatrice replied, reaching for him. "My husband." The first year of their marriage was a period of deep happiness and adjustment. Beatrice threw herself into her role as Austin's wife and the lady of the ranch, working alongside Mrs. Chen to manage the household and learning the rhythms of ranch life. She continued to play piano daily, and under Austin's encouragement, she began to seriously pursue composition, filling notebooks with musical ideas and completed pieces. Austin was an attentive and loving husband, never taking Beatrice for granted, always making time for her despite the constant demands of the ranch. They developed routines and rituals, like their evening rides when weather permitted, and Sunday afternoons spent reading together in companionable silence. Their physical relationship was tender and passionate, both of them delighting in the intimacy that marriage allowed. As winter approached, Beatrice began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited, not wanting to say anything until she was certain, but when she missed her monthly courses for the second time and began experiencing morning sickness, she knew it was time to tell Austin. She chose a quiet evening when they were alone in the main room, Austin working on ranch accounts while she played piano softly. She finished the piece she was working on and turned to find him watching her with that expression of contentment he often wore when she played. "Austin, I have something to tell you." Beatrice rose from the piano bench and moved to sit beside him on the sofa. He set aside his papers immediately, giving her his full attention. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. Something is very right." Beatrice took his hands in hers, unable to keep the smile from her face. "I am expecting a baby. We are going to be parents." For a moment, Austin simply stared at her, processing the information. Then joy broke across his face like dawn, and he let out a whoop of delight that would have been completely out of character if not for the extraordinary circumstances. He pulled Beatrice into his arms, holding her close but carefully, as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A baby," he murmured against her hair. "We are going to have a baby. Beatrice, you have made me the happiest man alive." "You are happy then?" Beatrice asked, though his reaction left no doubt. Happy does not begin to cover it. Austin pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. "Are you happy? How are you feeling? Do we need to get the doctor out here?" Beatrice laughed at his sudden cascade of concerns. "I am very happy. I am feeling well, just a bit queasy in the mornings, and there is no need for the doctor yet. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." But Austin insisted on bringing the doctor out the following week, just to make sure everything was progressing normally. Dr. Michaels examined Beatrice and pronounced her healthy, estimating that the baby would arrive sometime in late May or early June. He gave Austin a list of things to watch for and instructions on how to care for Beatrice, which Austin took so seriously that Beatrice had to gently dissuade him from treating her like an invalid. "I am pregnant, not sick," she reminded him when he tried to insist she should not climb the stairs alone. "I can still do most of the things I have always done." "I know," Austin said, looking sheepish. "I just worry. You and this baby are the most important things in my life. I could not bear it if anything happened to either of you." Beatrice softened, understanding that his concern came from love and perhaps from the losses he had already endured. "We will be fine, but I appreciate that you care so much." As her pregnancy progressed, Beatrice found new inspiration for her music. She composed lullabies and gentle melodies that she imagined playing for their child. Austin loved to sit with her in the evenings, his hand resting on her growing belly, talking to the baby and making plans for the future. They converted one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, with Austin building a beautiful wooden cradle with his own hands. Mrs. Chen and some of the ranch wives helped Beatrice sew tiny clothes and blankets, and the house filled with an atmosphere of joyful anticipation. Spring arrived with its usual burst of new life, the grasslands turning green and wildflowers blooming across the prairie. Beatrice grew large and uncomfortable as May approached, but she remained active, still playing piano though she had to adjust her position on the bench, still taking gentle walks around the ranch yard. On a warm evening in early June, Beatrice's labor began. Austin sent one of the hands racing to town to fetch Dr. Michaels and the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, while Mrs. Chen helped Beatrice upstairs and began the preparations they had planned weeks ago. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following day. Austin paced the hallway outside the bedroom, forbidden from entering by Mrs. Chen's firm orders, listening to Beatrice's cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. He prayed harder than he had since his mother's death, making bargains with God and promising anything if only Beatrice and the baby would be all right. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, he heard a different sound, the thin wail of a newborn baby. His heart nearly stopped, and then Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, smiling and exhausted. "You have a son, Mr. Cole, and your wife is tired but doing well." Austin did not wait for more permission. He rushed past Mrs. Chen into the bedroom where Beatrice lay pale and worn but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. He moved to her side, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "Beatrice, are you all right?" He touched her face gently, needing to reassure himself that she was truly safe. "I am fine," Beatrice said, her voice hoarse but happy. "We are both fine. Come meet your son." She shifted the blanket, revealing a tiny red face, eyes scrunched shut, a miniature fist waving in the air. Austin looked down at his child and felt something crack open in his chest, a love so fierce and immediate that it nearly brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," Austin whispered. "He is absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Beatrice asked, and at Austin's nod, she carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Austin had handled many fragile things in his life: newborn foals and calves, injured animals, delicate objects, but nothing had ever felt quite as precious as his son. He held the baby close, marveling at the tiny features, the miniature fingers and toes, the miracle of this new life he and Beatrice had created together. "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked, watching her husband and son with an expression of pure love. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Austin thought of the qualities he hoped to instill, the values he wanted to pass on. "What about James?" Austin suggested. "James Cole. It was my grandfather's name. He was a good man, honest and hardworking, devoted to his family." "James," Beatrice repeated, trying it out. "James Cole, I like it. It is strong and classic." The baby stirred in Austin's arms and let out a small cry. Beatrice held out her arms and Austin carefully returned the baby to her. They watched together as James began to nurse, both parents filled with wonder at this new chapter of their lives. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. James was a healthy baby but demanding, needing to be fed every few hours around the clock. Beatrice was determined to nurse him herself rather than hiring a wet nurse, and Austin supported her decision, taking on as many of the other household tasks as he could manage to give her time to rest between feedings. Mrs. Chen was invaluable during this time, managing the household and helping care for the baby when Beatrice needed to sleep. Austin cut back on his ranch duties, delegating more to Lynn and his other trusted men so he could be present for his wife and son. Slowly, they found their rhythm as a family. Beatrice would play piano with James sleeping in a cradle nearby, and she began to notice that certain melodies soothed him better than others. She composed a lullaby specifically for him, a gentle tune that never failed to calm his cries. Austin was a devoted father, spending hours simply holding his son, talking to him, introducing him to the horses and the ranch as if James could understand every word. The rough cattleman had been completely undone by fatherhood, and Beatrice loved him all the more for his tender care of their child. As James grew from an infant into a curious toddler, the house filled with new sounds, laughter, and the patter of small feet mixing with the music from Beatrice's piano. James showed an early interest in music, toddling over to the piano to bang on the keys with enthusiastic if unmusical determination. Beatrice would lift him onto her lap and guide his small hands to play simple melodies, delighting in his concentration and joy. When James was 2 years old, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less anxious, more confident in her body's ability to carry and deliver a child. Austin was thrilled, already imagining James with a sibling to play with and grow alongside. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and when the time came, Beatrice delivered a healthy baby girl with considerably less difficulty than James's birth. They named her Rose after Austin's mother, whose full name had been Rosemary. Rose was a quieter baby than James had been, content to watch the world with wide, curious eyes. James was initially uncertain about sharing his parents' attention, but he quickly grew protective of his little sister, wanting to help with everything from changing her clothes to bringing her toys. The ranch continued to prosper under Austin's management. He made smart decisions about breeding stock and land acquisition, and the Cole Ranch became known as one of the most successful operations in the area. But Austin never let business concerns overshadow his devotion to his family. He made sure to be present for important moments, to take time for evening rides with Beatrice when the children were settled, to teach James about ranching while still respecting the boy's own interests and inclinations. Beatrice's compositions had evolved over the years, becoming more sophisticated and emotionally complex. She had compiled several collections of her work, and Austin surprised her one year by arranging to have some of her pieces published by a music company in St. Louis. When the first printed copies arrived, Beatrice wept with joy, hardly able to believe that her music would be played by people across the country. The published pieces sold modestly but steadily, and Beatrice began to receive letters from people who had purchased and enjoyed her work. Some were from other musicians, complimenting her compositional skill. Others were from ordinary people who simply wanted to express how her music had touched them. Each letter was a treasure to Beatrice, validation that her art had value beyond her own personal enjoyment. As the children grew, the Cole family became a fixture in San Angelo society. Beatrice was no longer the former saloon pianist, but the respected Mrs. Cole, known for her musical talent and her charitable work. She and Austin hosted occasional gatherings at the ranch, and Beatrice would play for guests, her children sometimes joining her at the piano to show off what they had learned. Dutch, the old prospector who had befriended Beatrice at the Silver Star, became a regular visitor to the ranch, adopted by the family as a sort of honorary grandfather. He would sit on the porch with Austin, swapping stories and watching the children play, sometimes remarking with satisfaction that he had known all along that Beatrice was meant for better things than that saloon. When James was 8 and Rose was 6, Beatrice suggested to Austin that they might consider offering music lessons to other children in the area. Many families wanted their children to learn, but had no access to a qualified teacher. Austin embraced the idea immediately, and they converted one of the ranch's outbuildings into a small schoolroom with 2 pianos that Austin purchased from St. Louis. Beatrice began teaching 3 afternoons a week, taking students from families across the area. She charged modest fees, waiving them entirely for families who could not afford to pay. Her teaching became another source of joy, watching young minds grasp musical concepts and develop their own relationships with the art she loved so much. The years passed in a rhythm of work and family, of small joys and occasional challenges. There were difficult seasons when drought threatened the ranch or disease struck the cattle. There were personal sorrows, too, like when Mrs. Chen's husband Lin passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving a hole in the ranch community. But through everything, Austin and Beatrice faced life as partners, supporting each other through difficulties and celebrating triumphs together. When James was 15, he began to show serious interest in ranching, working alongside Austin and learning the business from the ground up. Rose, meanwhile, had inherited her mother's musical talent in full measure, composing her own pieces by age 12, and playing with a technical proficiency that sometimes surpassed Beatrice's own. One evening, Austin and Beatrice sat on their porch as they had countless times before, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. James was out checking the north pasture fences, taking on more responsibility as he grew into young manhood. Rose was inside, practicing a complicated sonata she would perform at a recital in town. "You ever think about how different your life might have been?" Austin asked, his arm around Beatrice's shoulders. "If I had not come into the Silver Star that day." Beatrice leaned into her husband's solid warmth, considering the question. "I try not to think about it because it frightens me. I was so lost back then, just surviving day to day with no real hope for anything better. If you had not offered me a chance, I do not know where I would have ended up." "I think you would have found your way somehow," Austin said with quiet confidence. "You have always had strength in you, Beatrice. I just had the privilege of being there when you were ready to use it." "We saved each other," Beatrice said, taking his hand and lacing their fingers together. "You gave me a chance at a real life, and I gave you music and love when you had resigned yourself to living without either. We were both alone, both afraid in our own ways, and we found each other. Best decision I ever made, walking into that saloon," Austin murmured. "Asking you to play for me at my ranch, no crowds required." Beatrice smiled at the memory, at how nervous she had been, how uncertain. "Best decision I ever made was saying yes." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, listening to Rose's piano music floating through the open windows, knowing that James would return soon and they would all gather for dinner as a family. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to years of hard work and love. "Happy?" Austin asked, as he had so many times over the years. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Beatrice replied, the same answer she always gave because it was always true. As the stars began to appear overhead, Beatrice thought about the girl she had been, playing piano in a saloon to survive, never imagining that a cowboy's simple offer would transform her entire life. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the courage it had taken to trust, to hope, to love. And she thought about the future still ahead, with children growing into their own lives, with music still to be composed and played, with years more to spend beside the man who had seen her potential when she had almost given up on herself. Inside, Rose finished her sonata, the final notes ringing pure and clear through the evening air. In the distance, they could see James riding back toward the house, sitting tall in the saddle, so much like his father. And here on the porch, Austin and Beatrice sat together, hands linked, hearts entwined, living proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the courage to take a chance on something or someone new. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. When James turned 18, he took on an even greater role in managing the ranch, showing the same fair-minded approach and strong work ethic that had always characterized his father. Austin felt deep pride watching his son grow into a capable young man, and he began to step back slightly from the day-to-day operations, trusting James to handle much of the responsibility. This gave Austin more time to spend with Beatrice, and they enjoyed a second honeymoon of sorts, taking trips to nearby cities to hear concerts and visit art galleries, things they had never had time for when the children were young and the ranch demanded constant attention. They traveled to St. Louis once, where Beatrice met with her publisher and attended a performance of some of her compositions by a professional orchestra. Austin watched her face during the performance, seeing the wonder and validation there, and felt grateful that he had been able to give her opportunities to develop her gift. Rose, at 16, was beginning to make decisions about her own future. She had received offers to study music at conservatories back east, prestigious opportunities that would have been unthinkable for a ranch girl from Texas just a generation earlier. But Rose was torn, loving music deeply, but also loving her home and family. One evening, the four of them sat together in the main room, discussing Rose's options. Beatrice played softly while they talked, her fingers finding melodies almost unconsciously after so many years at the keys. "I want you to know that whatever you decide, we support you," Austin told his daughter. "If you want to go east to study, we will make it happen. If you want to stay here and teach or perform locally, that is equally valid. Your happiness is what matters most." "But what if I make the wrong choice?" Rose asked, voicing the fear that had been plaguing her for months. Beatrice stopped playing and turned to look at her daughter. "There is no wrong choice, sweetheart. There are just different paths, each with their own rewards and challenges. You have to follow your heart and trust that wherever you end up is where you are meant to be." "How did you know?" Rose pressed. "When Father offered you the job here, how did you know it was the right decision?" Beatrice exchanged a glance with Austin, remembering that moment of choice all those years ago. "I did not know. Not for certain. I was terrified, actually. But I knew that staying at the saloon meant giving up on any hope of something better. Coming here was a risk, but it was also a chance. And I decided I would rather risk failure than accept a life that made me unhappy." Rose absorbed this, nodding slowly. "I think I want to stay here, at least for now. I can always go east later if I change my mind. But there is so much music still to learn from you, Mama, and I am not ready to leave home yet." Relief and joy washed over Beatrice's face. She had tried not to influence Rose's decision, knowing how important it was for her daughter to choose her own path, but she could not deny how happy she was to have more time with her girl. "Then we will make sure you have every opportunity right here," Austin said firmly. We can bring in additional teachers if you want to study specific techniques. We can arrange for you to perform in larger venues. Whatever you need to grow as a musician, we will provide. And they did. Over the next few years, Rose flourished as a musician and as a young woman. She began to develop her own teaching practice, working alongside Beatrice, but also bringing her own style and ideas to the instruction. She performed regularly at events throughout the region, building a reputation as a talented pianist and composer in her own right. James, meanwhile, had fallen in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a spirited young woman named Catherine who could ride as well as any man and was not afraid of hard work. When James asked for his parents' blessing to marry her, Austin and Beatrice gave it gladly, seeing in Catherine the same strength and determination that had drawn them to each other. The wedding was held at the Cole Ranch, with half the county in attendance. Beatrice played the ceremony music, her heart full as she watched her son pledge his life to the woman he loved. Austin stood proud as James's best man, and when he gave the toast at the reception, his voice cracked with emotion as he spoke about the joy of seeing his children happy and settled. James and Catherine built a house on the ranch property, and within a year, they welcomed the first of the next generation, a baby boy they named William. Austin and Beatrice embraced grandparenthood with enthusiasm, delighting in the baby while also enjoying the freedom to return him to his parents when he fussed. Dutch, now in his 80s and increasingly frail, spent his final years living in a small cottage on the Cole Ranch. Beatrice would visit him often, playing music on a small organ Austin had installed in the cottage, and Dutch would tell stories about the old days, about watching Beatrice survive in that saloon and knowing she was meant for better things. "You were meant to be right here," Dutch told her one afternoon, his voice weak but his eyes still sharp. "Some people, they are just in the wrong place until they find where they belong. You found it, Miss Beatrice. You found your home." When Dutch passed away peacefully in his sleep, a few weeks later, Beatrice mourned him as the friend he had been, one of the few people who had shown her kindness during the hardest period of her life. They buried him in the small cemetery on the ranch property, and Beatrice composed a gentle requiem in his memory. As Beatrice and Austin moved into their 50s, they settled into a comfortable rhythm that came from decades of partnership. The ranch was secure and prosperous, managed increasingly by James with Austin available to advise, but no longer carrying the daily burden of decision-making. This left Austin and Beatrice time to pursue their own interests and to simply enjoy each other's company. They had survived challenges over the years, periods of financial stress when cattle prices dropped, a serious illness that had nearly taken Austin from her when he was 43, the normal wear and tear of life on the frontier. But they had faced everything together, their love deepening with each shared difficulty and triumph. One spring afternoon, nearly 30 years after Beatrice had first come to the ranch, she and Austin rode out to the rise overlooking the creek, the place where he had first told her he was falling in love with her, where he had proposed marriage all those years ago. It had become a sacred spot for them, a place they returned to on anniversaries and other significant occasions. They sat together on the grass, watching the cottonwood trees sway in the breeze, listening to the creek burble over stones. Austin's hair was now more silver than dark, and Beatrice had threads of gray running through her own hair, but when she looked at him, she still saw the man who had walked into the Silver Star and offered her a chance at something better. "Do you remember what you said to me the first time we came here?" Beatrice asked, her head resting on Austin's shoulder. "I said a lot of things," Austin replied, his arm around her waist. "Which particular thing are you thinking of?" You said we had to risk happiness, that otherwise we were just existing, not really living. Beatrice turned to look up at him. You were right. Taking that risk, trusting you, building this life together, it has been the greatest adventure of my existence. Austin kissed her forehead tenderly. The adventure is not over yet, my love. We still have years ahead of us, God willing. More sunsets to watch, more music to hear you play, more moments with our children and grandchildren. More time with you, Beatrice added. That is what I treasure most. All these years, and I still love waking up beside you, still love talking with you in the evenings, still love the way you look at me like I am something precious. You are precious, Austin said seriously. You are the most precious thing in my life, Beatrice. You gave me love when I had resigned myself to loneliness. You gave me children and filled my house with music and laughter. You made my life immeasurably richer simply by being in it. They kissed, still tender and passionate after all these years, proving that true love does not fade with time but rather grows stronger, deeper, more nuanced with each passing season. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had witnessed together countless times, Beatrice thought about the unlikely path that had led her here. From the daughter of a music teacher to a saloon pianist struggling to survive, to the beloved wife of a rancher and the mother of accomplished children, to a composer whose work was played across the country, to a teacher passing on her knowledge to the next generation. Her life had been far richer than she ever could have imagined during those dark days at the Silver Star. And it had all begun because a cowboy had walked into a saloon, heard her play, and offered her a chance to play for him at his ranch. No crowds required. Such a simple offer, but it had changed everything. As they rode back to the ranch house in the gathering twilight, Beatrice could see lights glowing in the windows, could hear the faint sound of Rose playing piano, could see James and Catherine's house nearby with smoke rising from the chimney. This was home, this place and these people, this life she and Austin had built together from hope and hard work and enduring love. The years that followed brought more joys and more sorrows, as life always does. They welcomed more grandchildren as James and Catherine expanded their family. Rose eventually did marry, choosing a fellow musician who appreciated her talent and supported her work. Austin's health began to decline in his 60s, the hard years of ranch work taking their toll, but he faced aging with the same quiet dignity he had brought to everything else in his life. Beatrice continued to play and compose, her music evolving as she aged, becoming more contemplative and rich with the wisdom of lived experience. She published several more collections, and her work gained recognition beyond Texas, with performances in concert halls in major cities. But she never forgot her roots, never lost touch with the struggles that had shaped her, and she used her success to help other young musicians, particularly young women, find opportunities to develop their talents. When Austin passed away at the age of 72, surrounded by his family and at peace, Beatrice grieved deeply, but without bitterness. They had been blessed with more than 40 years together, years filled with love and partnership and shared purpose. She knew she had been fortunate beyond measure to find such a love, and while his death left a hole in her life that could never be filled, she also carried within her the countless memories of their time together. She continued to live at the ranch, now run entirely by James but still feeling like home. She played Austin's mother's piano every day, the instrument that had brought her to this place, that had been the catalyst for everything good in her life. She composed a memorial piece for Austin, pouring all her love and grief and gratitude into the music. And when she played it at a concert organized in his honor, there was not a dry eye in the audience. Beatrice lived to the age of 85, remaining active and engaged with her music and her family until the very end. She saw her grandchildren grow and have children of their own, ensuring that the ranch and the music would continue into future generations. She completed her final composition just weeks before her death, a serene and beautiful piece that seemed to capture a lifetime of emotion and experience in its notes. When she passed peacefully in her sleep one autumn night, her family gathered to celebrate a life well lived. They buried her beside Austin on the ranch property, under the wide Texas sky they had both loved. And at her memorial service, Rose played the piano, performing both her mother's compositions and the old pieces Beatrice had played in the saloon all those years ago, bringing the journey full circle. The ranch continued under James's management and eventually passed to his children, remaining in the Cole family for generations. The piano that Austin had bought for his mother, the piano that had drawn Beatrice to the ranch and changed her life, was carefully maintained and played by each new generation, a treasured family heirloom and a reminder of the love story that had started with a simple offer: "Play for me at my ranch, no crowds required." The story of the saloon pianist and the cowboy who offered her a better life became a cherished family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that courage and hope can transform lives, that love can be found in unexpected places, that taking a risk on someone or something new can lead to blessings beyond imagination. It became a testament to the power of music to connect souls, to heal wounds, to create beauty in a sometimes harsh world. And every time someone in the Cole family sat down at that old mahogany piano and coaxed melody from its keys, they honored Beatrice and Austin's memory. They celebrated the love that had built their family. And they proved that some things, like good music and true love, are truly timeless.